for this opportunity to be here. And I've actually had the blessing to be able to attend a couple of these already. And what I love about this format is it is definitely open. Stop me. Let's have a conversation. I want to just pour into you and really share, what God's done in my life and what God's doing through the U.S. Christian Chamber of Commerce too in our nation. Really passionate about that and just seeing God's move, his hand move in fantastic and amazing ways. And I do apologize. I am going to be running to the airport after this to get to DC. A really neat conference is happening in DC today, this evening, and then tomorrow. Although I do wish I could plug into the debate tonight, so I'll have to figure out how to get that recorded. But it's with Alabaster House, and what Kimberly does through Alabaster House is they pray for our representatives that are there in DC, and that's her entire mission. And so she's got a real heart for helping people connect, business owners connect with the leadership that's there at the Capitol building. And in doing that, she's titled the conference Leading in Crisis. And so I know that we're going to have a NFL panel tonight and a private tour of the Capitol, which is going to be a lot of fun. And I think they are in session and doing some voting today. So maybe get to see something I haven't seen before. And then of course some round tables and different things where we're going to be interacting with some of the Congress people and on the next following day. So it's going to be a great event. Looking forward to that. It's her first time to do a conference like this. And so it'll be neat to see, some takeaways from it. And hopefully she continues doing it, especially with tomorrow being 9/11. And that's really the intention behind this conference, is to just not forget and to really be and rise up great leaders in our nation. And so that's really what I wanted to kind of kick off with before I share a little bit about my story, is just our nation as a whole. If you think about just the foundation of our nation, the greatest nation in the world, is really based on values that each one of us hold dear and that are aligned. Christian values. If you look at some of the things that we would say, and even on our money, and God we trust, one nation under God. I mean, it is truly something that is a great amount of pride for our nation, but it's also those biblical values that we hold dear in helping us to maintain order and freedom of religion as well. And over the past several years, there's been a real effort for people to remove God from the foundation of our nation. So much so that we're being challenged at almost every turn, to the point now today in our businesses, Christian businesses, are being challenged to the point of losing our freedom, even persecuted for running Christian businesses. And in some cases, we see debanking, we see cancellations, we're seeing people get bullied for living out their values in their workplace or in their business. And as we all know, the story of the cake baker, who has spent millions and millions of dollars litigating cases in the Supreme Court because he chose not to use his business to create wedding cakes for same-sex marriages. And so when we start to see this turn in our nation, and it really being leaning more towards a post-Christian society. In fact, I have a couple of statistics to share with you about the decline of Christianity in America. One of them comes from Pew Research, and it shows that Christians dropped from 78% to around 63, while the religious unaffiliated, so like atheists, agnostics, that rose from 16 to almost 30% from 2007 to 2021. One thing that we saw, and this was really exacerbated during COVID, was the churches. In 2022, church membership fell below 50% for the first time, down to 70%. And listen, what we've seen statistically is that 7 out of 10 people are not attending churches. And so that's an alarming number, to say, wow, what has happened? And in our nation, the great nation of the United States of America, we saw during COVID the liquor stores be prioritized as essential business while churches were closed. And those that tried to brave being opened really suffered, some consequences to doing that through the law. And so, one more thing and statistic that really is alarming to me is our millennials. 49% of millennials identified as Christian in 2019. But in the baby boomer generation, that number was more like 84% identified as Christian. So, we're seeing this decline of Christianity in America, and we're also becoming more of a post-Christian society. And so the question I had to ask myself is, why is that? And what's happening that is creating this decline of Christianity in our nation? This really disturbed my spirit. And I think there's a couple of things at play here. One of those is something that happened. I happened to intercept a memo, if you will, from the American Atheist group. And this memo basically talked about the 1,600 bills that they were monitoring that were going through, either the local process or even at the national process, but they were monitoring 1,600 bills. They're very well organized. And there were some different facets of those things that they were focused on. And it was interesting because when you read the language, it would be language that is benign language that sounds like equality, language that sounds like education and youth, language that sounds like non-discrimination, language that says healthcare and wellness and reproductive rights. And these types of words, while they are good words, it can be good words like diversity, equity, and inclusion, or governance in your business, sustainability. These have been adopted or taken and used for things that are in direct opposition to our values and beliefs. And so these groups are well organized, they're well funded, they have common language, and they have a common mission. And that mission is against everything that we believe in. And it is to remove God, it is to remove our freedom to be able to worship God, declare God, and use our businesses for the good of kingdom advancement. And so that's number one. So while we're all, and I say I'm grouping us into a mass group here, but why we're all arguing about denomination or maybe party, the opposition has set all of their differences aside and focused on one thing, and they're streamlined. So we have a lack of unity for the movement and the values that we hold dear. And then there's another issue, I think, that's really exacerbated this situation and caused us to be in the situation we're in this society. And that is that as Americans, and American business owners, we've gotten very singularly focused on our business, our P&L, our employees, our bottom line. We've been building bigger storehouses instead of taking a look up to say, what's happening in my community? What's happening around me? How can I serve and truly do so? And I think now people, because it's gotten to the place where we're getting persecuted, where there's a lot of bad things that are happening, I think now people are starting to look up and realize what's happened, where do I go? Well, here's what's happened. The people that hate everything that we stand for have been out there every day hitting base runs, base runs, base runs. And meanwhile, we're just so focused on our business and our storehouses. And I know a little bit about that because that's a lot about my story. My background is I was raised in a very small town of 300, population 300. So like, think about that for a second. There was 7 people in my graduating class. That 300 census includes dogs, cats, and dead people. That pretty much was everybody in there. And when I was raised in that small town, my family, we had the perfect attendance for church award for 10 years in a row. Now, I want you to kind of conceptualize that. That's 520 church services that my family got the big award for. And that was just what it was. It was go to the church house for 1 hour, live as atheists for the rest of the week, get the award because that made us prominently look good in our small town community. And we can call ourselves Christian. And that's how I learned how to be a Christian. I was the worst kind of Christian. I was a Sunday Christian. Sunday
Wow.
Christians are those that have no fruit, they have no spiritual life. They do it as a duty, but they don't have a heart relationship with the Lord. They don't have prayer time. They don't have biblical reading time. And there is no relationship with the Lord or desire to be in relationship, but yet they call themselves a Christian. And so that's what I learned and that's what I was. And I went off to college because let me tell you, I could not wait to get out of that small town. I was gonna blaze a trail and I was out of there, man. And 6.5 hours, packed up my car myself, went to KU, might see my little Jayhawk behind me here. And I was gonna go set the world on fire. Well, there was a little bit of something that was seeded in me that I didn't even realize that. And it was when my dad told me that I wasn't as smart as my brother and sister.
Wow.
He told me that I was going to have to get lucky because, I just wasn't as smart as they were. And I didn't realize that that
Wow.
stuck a hold of me and I started to live my life like that. That was more of a self fulfilling prophecy, if you will. And so I go up to college, I get myself into a little bit of trouble. And here's the thing about what my dad said. He was right. I was not as book smart as my brother and sister, but I had this little thing called emotional intelligence. And now we can see studies that show 85% of job success is from well developed people skills. But my dad was from academia and he really thought book smarts were the only way that you were going to succeed in life. And so I ended up dropping out of college with 21 hours left. And so
Oh,
here I was, a big,
no
yeah,
way.
yes way, a big failure, how I felt. I got myself into a mess. The only way out of it was to return home and so 6.5 hours all the way back to that little town where I know that they knew that I was coming before I even got there. And that was really a tough time for me because it was like, what am I going to do? And candidly, it was one of those questions of, do I just fall in line with everybody else, get pregnant, marry somebody here, smoke weed, and just live this life? Or what am I going to do? And so I knew that I had to figure out, like, get a job or something. And so I started stocking shelves in a truck parts store.
No way.
And yeah, that truck parts store happened to be a subsidiary of an oil and gas company, happened to. And they were trying out this truck parts store to see if it fit. We'd work on the compressors and we'd work on the trucks. Well, as I was stocking shelves, I heard them say that they were looking for a secretary and somebody to do the books. Well, I was not inclined at all to do any kind of books. I'm more of a visionary type of person. But I stayed up all night. I learned Excel. I learned how to, do some numbers and I presented myself and they gave me the job. And so I stayed there for a year. Well, that business didn't work out. And so, but they happen to have an opening for a front desk secretary in about a 30-minute town away. And so I did that. And from there, it just took off. I remember I was the only woman in the office and I was the secretary and then became the bookkeeper and did some of the payroll and stuff. But I kind of had capped out. I had bought my first house. I was starting to like this business thing. I say I cut my teeth in oil and gas and I was really enjoying it. And I remember talking to my manager and saying to him, is there any way that I could, take another opportunity? How can I grow, make more, do more? And he looked at me and he kind of patted me on the head a little and he said, there's really no other jobs out here for you. You're probably going to have to move and take another office job somewhere back up in Kansas City. And, the thing about that is at the time, I mean, I just took it as great advice and I did exactly what he told me to do. But now looking back on it retrospectively, he just didn't see a path for me because of my gender, because there were plenty of opportunities, but he just didn't see that. It was fun to take those jobs. I went into HR, and that's where I met my first mentor. She encouraged me to go back and get my undergrad in psychology. Then I took a job in the call center as a supervisor, and that was just an incredible experience. My very first termination that I did was there. I was the youngest supervisor in this place. It was a union shop. They thought I was a spy from HR. There was a massive amount of grievances. It was a really, really, really difficult place to work. Everything was monitored. Those call center agents, we knew how much it cost us when they took a breath. But it was such an opportunity to really hone leadership skills. And I remember plugging in my earbuds and sitting by them and looking at their pictures and getting to know them. And that's really where I learned the importance of measurement and metrics, but the relationship and the value, the balance of the two. And from there, I went into a position selling natural gas on the NYMEX. We were trading basis differential. All of this is going through this company. So I never left the company. I was just growing and going. God opened every single door. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that it was God because again, I'm still a Sunday Christian. But I'm kind of rolling and flowing. And at this point, I'm selling gas, and a position came open as the director of the call center that I used to be the supervisor for, and that would have been a jump. So it would have gone supervisor, manager, director. But it caught my eye, and so I just reached out to the executive VP and she said, come up to my office. I had my interview there. I became the director, which meant those bosses that I had, I became their bosses. One of them fled the place, let's just say that. Probably good on her. I stayed there so at this point, I'm overseeing all of customer service for Kansas Gas Service, about 80,000 customers in Kansas. We're regulated by the Kansas Corporation Commission, and there was a union shop. And so that was my role. And that was a really incredible opportunity. And I'll never forget when the president and the vice president called me into the office. It was about a 50-minute drive from where I was. My palms are sweating. I have no idea why they brought me into the office. And turns out they wanted to put me up for a vice president role in the company. Now, keep in mind, there's only 3 vice presidents per company and the 3 distribution companies. And again, this is a Fortune 200 company. And so there's 60 officers in total. And so long story short, I ended up taking as a vice president all of the West Texas. So I was running the gas company in 47 cities on the west side of Texas at 34 years old. I was over all of Texas Gas Service customer service. And we were, doing rate cases and running the gas. I mean, I'm talking from construction and engineering. It was absolutely amazing and only explainable by God. But what happened to the Sunday Christian is she got her head pretty big. I went back and I remember telling my president, the boss of Texas Gas, I said, I think I want to go back and get my master's. And he says to me, kind of punched me in the arm. He's like, Parker, you're 34 years old. You're set for life. Why would you ever go do that? That was kind of the culture. And I said, I don't know. I just feel like I need to. I mean, if I would have known what I know today, I'd be like, that's the Holy Spirit prompting me and guiding me. When I met with the CEO to take this position in Texas, he said it was as if someone crafted your resume. All of those positions and places I went in the company, it was as if somebody designed it specifically
Wow.
for the role I was in. This executive role was the only role that had call center under it and gas company as well. And it truly only explainable by God. But what happened is, and this is what I see happening in business today with people, is they are just building bigger storehouses. They're nicer houses, better cars, more money for more fun. And
Mm.
I had no idea, even though I served on maybe at some point 7 to 8 boards at a time in my capacity, I didn't know what was going on around me. I didn't know my role as a voter in our nation. I didn't know the opportunity I had to influence and touch lives. And really what I did was I used that platform and made it all about me. There was no fruit around my tree. I can tell you, I told people I was a Christian. And I know that people looked at me and said, if that's a Christian, I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Um, to do what I did and to get where I went, there was a lot of bodies along the sides of the road, including my own marriage, which I got divorced. I became a solo mom to a little girl, and I didn't even know where she went to dance. I had to ask her friend's mom so I could get her to dance. I mean, that's how
Mm.
disconnected from everything I was. But I was successful according to the world, and I was morally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt. I was physically bankrupt, and I was broken and empty, but I had success. And I feel like I was working for that approval so that I could prove that I wasn't as stupid as my dad thought I was. And I was in reality a lost and broken person. And where we meet a lot of business owners today is where I was then. And as God would have it, I stayed in that gas company for a full 15 years. And then it was time to go. I met the love of my life. I went from one thing to the next thing, and we moved, and then we ended up in Florida. So that's how I got here. Unfortunately, I still hadn't surrendered my life to Christ. And unfortunately, I still was putting everything and anything in the place of where God would go. I used to worship work. And now I use my work as worship, but at the time I worship work, I
Wow.
worship all the things that the world tells you makes you happy. And at the end of the day, none of it did. After my second divorce, I remember sitting in my 5,000 square foot home in Windermere, Florida, in the most affluent area with my daughter in the perfect school. And here I was, a failure again. And it was at that point I had got Christian friends, and some no Christian friends that like went to church and didn't throw a rager right after church, like real friends that were like living with Christ.
Like a rager party.
Yeah, like rager. And these are some amazing, beautiful people. And I was like, what is different about them? I want it. And that's when, after I failed in my second marriage, I hit the floor. And I just remember saying, okay, God, if this is real, if this whole thing is true, like more of you, less of me, and the living water of Jesus Christ washed through me and over me, and instantly everything changed.
Wow.
Everything changed in my life. And it was funny because at this point now, most of my warm market is in the Midwest, and I want to grow my company. Now I'm a single mom again. Here I go. My daughter, she's lived in 12 houses, and people would always say, "Are you in the military?" I said, "No, I'm in the gas company." I mean, we've moved and moved and moved, and she's quite a young lady. She really is. But a big part of that was when I fully accepted the Lord, our lives changed completely. And somebody suggested, "Hey, you should go check out the Christian Chamber of Commerce." And I said, "That's a thing?" And it turns out that it was. When I met with the president of the Christian Chamber, it was a 2 hour meeting. He gets in the car, he calls his wife. I didn't know this, but he calls his wife and he says, God said she's the one. I didn't know this poor man had been waiting for 5 years to retire, and he was waiting for his succession. He even told the chamber he was retiring, and God said, no, you're not to let go yet. And so he was waiting for me. And finally, I got to the place where I was right and ready to take over the chamber. And so I took the Central Florida Christian Chamber 2 months after COVID, and we started to grow, and the Lord just started to show me everything. and an opportunity to really make an impact in Christian business. And then that's where we are today with the US Christian Chamber. But what I learned in all of this is that there's people out there that are doing amazing things in their business. They're using their businesses as a force for good. And one of my favorite businesses, we had him speak at the conference, is Bill Jurgen with Correct Craft. Their mission statement that's on the walls of their business is building boats for the glory of God. And it's just so refreshing and neat to see that people are able to take their whole self to work and bring their faith in God to work, be a whole person. You don't have to be somebody different at work and somebody different at church and somebody different here. You get to be the same and whole person. And when you do that, you have such an opportunity to make a significant kingdom impact in your business. And not only do you get to make an advancement of the kingdom through your business where people go, "What's different about you? uh, you reacted this way and I didn't expect that. Tell me why," to really share that story. But you also get to bring in the best and most incredible book in business, and that's the Holy Living Word of God. There's an answer in there for every situation that you're walking through, personally and professionally. And if we can build our businesses on the foundation of Jesus Christ, these businesses will not be taken out with anything, the next flood or wave or technology or policy. They will stand the test of time if they're built on the rock. And they may not look like they did when you started, but as long as you're willing to focus on God, then it won't matter what it looks like because you'll know that you'll be serving Him.
That's
And the
good.
last things we see through these amazing companies is citywide transformation. We see great companies not doing what Krystal was doing and being so focused on herself. But we see these great companies and great leaders pouring into their communities and investing into their lives of the people in their communities. And when we do that, then we start to see city transformation as a result of these great companies. But there's a problem with this, and this was the problem that we identified. And I think it's best to just show you the visual because I want you to see what God showed me on this. And it's this right here. It's that you've got all of these great companies. Hopefully you can see my screen. You've got all these great companies doing amazing kingdom things, but yet they're all separate. The problem is, and the challenge is how do we get them all to come together so that we can make a collective impact together? And so that's really what we do at the Christian Chamber. And in doing so, we're able to see these companies come together and be a unifying force for Christian businesses. And we want to impact the way the world conducts business. That's our mission, that's our goal in our heart. And we're going to do that through kingdom advancement, strengthening Christian businesses and transforming cities. And so, what the Lord showed me was what happens when we take all of these chambers. I don't know if you can see the chambers here,
Yeah.
but okay, great. If we could take all of these businesses and really start to bring them together under inside of a Christian Chamber of Commerce, if we can use those sort of a new wineskin to unify Christian businesses, where now instead of our money leaking out into the world to support organizations that want to destroy us, we will know who the Christian businesses are. We will be intentional about doing business together and serving one another in those companies and truly having that mindset of multiplication. When I do business with a Christian business owner, my dollar multiplies. Not only am I serving my brother or sister in Christ, but I know that they're going to spend money and support causes of things that are in alignment with me. And so, why wouldn't I want to take that multiplier effect? And when we do that, we just see absolute transformation. And so, one of the neat things that we get to do through the US Christian Chamber of Commerce is our Christian Chamber Coalition. And right now, I mean, we're only a 14-month-old organization. So, Central Florida, God led me there. I got to bring all of that business stuff that God gave me back in the day when I was not a full operating Christian. I was just a Sunday Christian, but God was teaching me great business lessons. And nothing is ever forsaken or forgotten or lost. Nothing, God will never let you or allow you to go through anything that he can't use today. Nothing's too broken or too anything for God. And so he was able to help me to use all of that for what we're doing today through the coalition and through US Christian Chamber. We have Christian chambers coming together all over the US to serve God and to serve kingdom businesses and help them to be united and do business together. And so I just wanted to share with you a little bit about that because, especially because Michigan and this group here is has such a heart to see Christian businesses come together and unify and grow, and we want to serve you uh, in that way. And so it's really exciting the way that our paths crossed and how God's bringing us all together to do this and what's next for the Michigan area as well. But really, I think the biggest thing I wanted to really share with you today is that as business owners, we all have a choice. We can make it all about us, or we can make it about Him. And when we make it about the King of Kings, the author and giver of life, then so many amazing things are afforded to you in your business. It's like unlocking something that could be so great. And what I was doing when I was corporate Krystal is I was holding back the blessing from my family. I was holding back the blessing for my life. I was holding back the blessing for my employees and the people that looked up to me. And I was truly blocking all of that because I made it about me. And when we can make it about Him, then there is just an overwhelming flow of blessings and goodness for everybody involved and around you. It's an aura, it's a fragrance, it's that light that cannot be hidden. It's that city set on a hill. And when you're operating under the unction of the Holy Spirit, focused on Him, amazing things can happen. And if you'll allow me to, Rod, I just want to share one of my favorite stories from Correct Craft of what can happen when we have the freedom in our nation to follow God, when we put Him first and serve Him first, how we can truly be a blessing to so many people. And it's one of my absolute favorite stories. So if you allow me to share this story, I
Go for
promise
it, go
you
for
all,
it, love it.
I'm going to put on my professor glasses. Okay. So this is one of my favorite books. It's called Making Life Better. It's the Correct Craft story. And John may have heard some of this when he was at the conference, but I want to set the stage for you so you kind of get like, I want to put you here. This was written by Bill Jurgen, and it is true story about Correct Craft. The United States was still at war in December of 1944. And so that was World War II. Yeah, there you go. Eric's with me. World War II. There you go. Um, the servicemen were overseas. They faced the Christmas season with fear and uncertainty. But Adolf Hitler overplayed his hand in the Battle of the Bulge. In a massive counterattack against Allied forces staged just before Christmas, his army inflicted some major damage, but they suffered heavy losses. So many Americans were unaware of this, but the Third Reich began to crumble. General Eisenhower and his forces rapidly advanced. They were pushing through France, Belgium, across the border into Germany toward Berlin. Victory seemed near, yet there was one major setback that stood before them, and it was the Rhine River. Since that time of Napoleon, the swift, muddy river held Germany's enemies at bay. How would they cross the Rhine? And the thing is about this is if they would have had any delays, it would have cost them supplies, momentum, and opportunity. So what happened was the Army Corps of Engineers sent out to all of the people that were the boat makers They needed a very special type of boat to get across the Rhine River. And so they reached out to Correct Craft as one of the many suppliers
Wow.
looking for them to make this boat. And Mr. Walt, he said, I'll have to pray and get back to you to tell you how many boats we can provide. Now, there's also another factor here. It was less than 30 days they needed these boats. This was a small boat maker. The most they had ever made in one 30-day period was 48 boats. So as he prayed, he came back and he said, we're going to make 300 boats for you in less than 30 days. And the Army Corps of Engineers said, great. But Mr. Walt said, but there's one caveat to that. And they said, what is it? He said, well, we honor the Sabbath on Sundays and we will not work on Sundays. And they pushed back and they said, this is a state of emergency for our nation. How could you put that, that first? Absolutely not. You cannot you cannot take Sundays off. You have to burn straight through. You're never going to make the 300 boats. And Mr. Walt said this, quote, if we can't serve the Lord and the US Navy at the same time, we just won't serve the Navy. And he meant it. So they decided that they were in such need that they would, watch them fail, basically. And so they started to grow their workforce. And if you remember at the time, most of the men were at war. So they had to, hire a lot of women to come into these factory types of jobs to build the boats. And so I want to kind of put you in the scene here, but I also want to encourage you to think about a time where you are using your natural eyesight to look at something that God wanted to show you differently.
Oh
We
man.
can't accomplish a supernatural we can't accomplish a supernatural calling on our life with our human power.
Preach it.
And so what this story does is it reminds me that we all have a supernatural calling on our life. There's supernatural innovation. There's things that are ready to be unlocked for you, but as long as you're trying to do it in your humanness, you're blocking that blessing. And so this is the part where I just love this and I want to just take you through this what happened here. So on Monday, February the 12th, the company built its first storm boat. Woohoo, they got one. And what seemed like an agonizingly slow process began to improve. The workers built 3 boats on Tuesday and 7 on Wednesday. This isn't going to get to 300 in half of a month now. Some of their employees, because on Wednesday, some of their employees literally were scratching their heads in disbelief when the Melons called a halt for the plant's midweek chapel service. Like, can you imagine? We've got 300 boats to build. They're coming up slow. And oh, we've got chapel service, folks. We're going to keep the main thing the main thing.
Oh my word.
With 3 of the 15 work days gone, this is all they've got. Only 11 boats had been built. Think about what you're looking at with your human eyes and what God wants to show you through the Spirit.
Yeah.
And so that night, the entire Balloon family, because his sons were working there, they met together and they prayed. They prayed more desperately than they'd ever prayed before, asking God to show them a way to complete the job. And young Walt awakened the next morning with an idea that would speed up production. So, how we see problems determines our ability to experience potentially innovation. If you see problem and all you see is a problem, you're going to get a problem. If you see a problem as an opportunity, you might get some innovation. But how you see God determines your ability to experience supernatural innovation beyond and above anything that could ever be explainable but by God.
Yes.
And young Walt woke up the next day with this innovative idea, supernatural innovation. They made the changes on the machine, but it was going to take 1 week to complete that. Now, keep in mind, we got 15 work days, and 1 week of this is just going to be to make this innovative change. On Thursday, February the 15th, less than 2 weeks away from their deadline, the workers built 13 boats. On Friday, they built 17, and on Saturday, 21. Still, with 6 of the 15 work days gone, only 62 of the 300 boats had been built. Now, most people, most humans in business right now, they're looking at all their options. How are we going to pull out of this contract? What are we going to do? We're never going to make it, and get distracted from doing what God told you to do. He's not going to take you there and leave you in the middle. It's us
Yeah.
that leave him. It's
Yeah.
us that
So
walk away from his calling and
yeah.
his blessing and his provision because we quit too soon. But not, well, not this family. The work crew stopped and rested again on Sunday, resuming production early Monday morning, February the 19th, refreshed by the day of rest. And with the new machine in action, they forged ahead. Production accelerated, and 2 days later, an Army colonel flew down from Atlanta and they found boats stacked all over the roads, all over Orlando. National Geographic called it a miracle production because not only did they honor God, not only did they disregard what the human eye could see, but they forged ahead. And now, with just a few days left before their time was up, they miraculously made 306 boats 4 days before the deadline. 4 days before the deadline, they miraculously made 306 boats. But see, something else happened. Those other contractors and companies that powered through, that didn't take a day of rest, didn't have God at the helm, they all fell behind. Nobody met their scheduled deadline. The only one that met it was Correct Craft. So they come back to Correct Craft, the ones that they've tried to make not honor God on Sundays. And they said, "Do you think you could build 100 more boats?" They said, "Yes, we can." So in that little bit of time, they built 100 more boats. They sent over 400 boats, 406 boats, to help our army stop evil, just sheer evil. So they get there to the Rhine River, and of the 700 boats that were there was only 406 boats that worked. The other ones were fitted incorrectly. They couldn't get the motors in them. Had it not been for God's provision, had it not been for an obedient servant of God, standing forward and standing in the gap for a mission for our nation, for the lives of humans, for a job. Our jobs are more than just what it appears on the surface. And God's called each one of us to different things. Some are boat makers, some are accountants, some are website designers. Some of us are just business nerds. But whatever it is that you've been called for, if you keep God at the center, you will experience supernatural things that are only explainable by God. And isn't that the life and type of business that you want to run? So I want to just thank you for an opportunity to share today. It was really an honor, and open it up for any feedback or questions or whatever.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Um, First of all, you are an incredible inspiration. I can't wait. I want to be able to share this to help grow it in Michigan and to grow it in whatever city or state or whatever that you can get it going. But I also want to thank your dad. I want to thank
Yeah.
your dad for laying a seed in you, and God used it in a great way, right? Like God
Mhm.
used
Yeah.
it in an incredible cool way. So um
Thank you.
just putting God first, and everything that you said, and that's like just when me and Rodney were first talking about this, is just how do we get Christian businesses to use other Christian businesses, and the stat of 14 times going around between the Muslim community and 8 or 9 between the Jewish community, and like 1.5 or whatever it is between Christian companies is, it's, like startling, right? And how can that be? So, and I think even we still have conversations, we're still afraid to say, how do we do business together? Like we're still like held back from asking that question still. And that should be the driven purpose of all this, and growing and letting him grow it the way that he wants to grow it. And I can tell you right now that one person, I don't know if this is the second call or whatever on, but I knew that Michelle that I invited to today, she would love